Good morning. Please rise in body or spirit and join in the singing of our opening hymn, number 140, Hail the Glorious Golden City. You may recognize the tune. We'll sing all the verses. I either have to apologize to the song leaders or to act like I was supposed to do that. So we'll give you another chance at the other hymn at the end if you'd like. As we begin our worship service on this Mother's Day, please hear these words written by Linda Susan Ulrich. For all the mothers and mother figures, the grandmothers, aunts, and extended family members who mother, the soon-to-be mothers, the wish they were mothers, the never wanted to be mothers, the birth mothers, foster mothers, adoptive mothers, stepmothers, the more than one mom mothers, the single mothers, separated mothers, stay-at-home mothers, unhoused mothers, the grieving mothers, those who grieve the loss of their own mothers, and those whose grief is complex, for all the communities that mother, and for all who depend on the great mother, You are held and loved. We welcome our Director of Lifespan Religious Education, Beth Curtis, who will present the Time for All Ages today.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good morning. I have a story today it's a traditional Chinese tale, and it's been adapted for oral telling. Long ago in China, there lived a poor boy named Liang. He earned his living gathering firewood and cutting reeds, but more than anything, Liang wanted to paint. And one day, as he passed an art school, he stepped inside and said, "I want so much to paint. Please, will you teach me?" The teacher glared at him. "A beggar wants to paint?" And he drove Liang away. But Liang couldn't keep his fingers still. When he was out gathering wood, he drew birds in the sand with a twig. He painted pictures in his mind, even when he had nothing to draw with. That night, Liang had a dream. An old man flew down from the sky on a phoenix and placed a brush in Liang's hand. "This is a magic paintbrush," the old man said. "Use it wisely." Liang awoke with the brush still in his hand. He jumped up, beaming. "Oh, thank you so much," he called to the sky. Right away, Liang tested it. He painted a deer, and the deer sprang to life. He painted toys for the village children, birds and horses, lanterns and balls. Then he went to the marketplace and he began to paint birds for coins. To be careful, though, he left something out of each bird so that they wouldn't fly away. One day, a man asked for a crane. Liang gave it just one eye, but oops! A drop of ink fell on the other eye, and the crane flapped its wings and soared into the sky. Now everyone knew about the magic brush, including the greedy emperor. The emperor sent his soldiers out to capture Liang and demanded the brush. Liang refused. So the emperor had him dragged to the palace and locked in a dungeon. Then the emperor picked up the brush and tried to use it himself. He painted mountains of gold. Oh, but they turned to piles of rocks. He painted a tree, but it turned into a python that snapped at him. The brush didn't work for him. It only answered to a good heart. So Liang sent the emperor a message. "If you set me free, I will paint whatever you wish." The emperor agreed, and the emperor said, "I want you to draw me a golden mountain, and I will go there and gather the gold." But first, Liang drew a sea. The emperor was angry. "Well, why did you draw a sea? I want a golden mountain. Draw it quickly." So Liang drew a golden mountain, which they could see far away into the sea. The emperor commanded, "Well, draw me a big ship quickly. I need to go gather the gold." Liang smiled quietly and drew a big grand ship with large sails. The emperor gathered his family, for he trusted no one else, and jumped into the ship and set off to find the gold. But the ship was stalled because there was no wind. And the emperor called out from the shore, "Draw a strong wind!" And Yang obeyed. The wind propelled the ship forward. "Faster, stronger!" the emperor called out. "I must get there quickly." Yang drew a strong wind that quickly took the ship far out into the sea. "Enough, enough!" the emperor yelled as the boat began tossing and turning. Oh, but it was too late. Yang could no longer hear his cries. The ship tipped in the wind, and crack! It broke into a million pieces. The emperor and the court sank to the bottom of the sea, and no one ever saw them again. As for Yang, well, some say he returned to his village, and others say he wandered the world, painting for the poor wherever he went. You know, Yang used his imagination and his gift to help others and to create a better world, not for wealth or power, but to bring joy and fairness to the world. Now, we may not have a magic paintbrush, but we all have something special, an idea, a talent, or a dream. When we use our imagination with kindness and courage, we can help make the world a better place.
We are fortunate today to have special music presented by Gina Romeo, accompanied by Gary Smart. Gina is an active friend of this church. You can read more about her in the order of service, but one thing I especially want to mention is that she is a music therapist. She helps clients who are working toward goals. The goals might be social, motor, or cognitive. And Gina uses music to support those clients in reaching their goals. The first piece she will play for us today is an air by Bach. Thank you, Gina, for providing our music today. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Good morning again. My name is Elizabeth DeCoux, and it's my privilege to serve as your worship leader this morning. Welcome to Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church, which we often abbreviate as BBUUC. We're so glad you have joined us today. I especially want to welcome any first-time or returning visitors. If you are a visitor, I invite you to stop by the welcome table near the entrance where you can fill out a name tag so we can greet you and welcome you by name. You can pick up some materials about Unitarian Universalism and materials about this church and the path to membership if that interests you. If you want to know more about this congregation and Unitarian Universalism, we offer classes to help you get to know us. We invite everyone to join us for fellowship in the back of the room after the service has ended. I hope to see you there. As Unitarian Universalists, we ask you to know us by our deeds and not our creeds. That's because we have no mandatory shared creed. What connects us instead is our congregational covenant. You'll find that covenant in the order of service, and I invite you to recite it with me now. We covenant to engage one another with honesty, kindness, and respect, to value diversity, seek understanding of our differences, and practice precious accountability with care, love, and empathy. We make these promises to those who are here and those yet to come, so that we may be a safe, welcoming, and beloved community of acceptance, learning, and transformation. The symbol of our faith is the flaming chalice. As we light this chalice in a moment, we'll be joining with other Unitarian Universalists across the miles and across the centuries. As Chris Kynes comes forward to light our chalice, please hear the words of Reverend Scott Taylor. In the soft light of this flame, may our lives shimmer anew. May we notice new possibilities in those relationships that seem lost. May the hunger growing within give birth to new dreams. May the courage of letting go pull a new story into view. May what is giving way to what might be. May we believe again in the world we imagine. Thank you, Chris. Please rise in body or spirit and join in singing our call to worship. You'll find the words in your order of service. Thank you so much. Some of you may have recognized that tune that they played, You'll Be in My Heart. Each Sunday, we receive an offering to sustain the mission and work of this church and to preserve the beauty and safety of our land and building. You'll find some modern, high-tech ways to give. There's a QR code in the order of service, and you can also go to our webpage and see an option to donate there. In addition to these more modern methods, we also participate in the time-honored tradition of passing the plate. Whatever your decision about giving, we ask that you join in this ritual by taking the plate when it comes to you and passing it on to your neighbor. Our offertory ushers, Ted Clisby and David Rulison, will please come forward to receive the offering. When they have finished, I will invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn 123, Spirit of Life. Alyssa Halliday is a gifted and beloved member of this congregation. You can read more about her in your order of service. Today she will present a sermon written by Reverend Heather Concannon entitled, "The World Our Hearts Know is Possible."
Thank you, Elizabeth. Reverend Heather wrote this sermon in February of 2024, so just over a year ago. She begins, "In recent years, I've gotten very into a genre of fiction books that I have since learned is best described as solar punk. Solar punk is a subgenre of speculative science fiction that imagines the kinds of world humans could live in if we collectively turned towards sustainability, cooperation, mutuality, and acceptance. I have so many favorites, but a recent book that I have loved is The Monk and Robot series by Becky Chambers. And I won't give any spoilers, but I will say that the world that the author builds is just exquisite. It is a world in which humans have recognized their environmental destruction and turned toward more sustainable ways of living. There are all sorts of gender identities and sexual orientations expressed in the book, and it's just all so normal and accepted. And humans have denounced their domination over the earth and other beings, including the sentient robots who once worked for them generations ago. And the story explores the encounter between a monk and one of those emancipated robots as they reflect together on the world in which they live. I've heard these kinds of books described as being cozy, but I think that they speak to a deeper need than just comfort. I think that one of the profound and prophetic things that these books and others like them do is that they help us imagine a different world. A world that is not built on the fundamental premises of environmental degradation or our current ways of decision-making or domination. It creates a vision for a world that I think we sometimes have a hard time accessing ourselves when we feel the need to plot out the realistic practicalities of how we get to that world from this one. In college, I majored in women and gender studies, and I became a very unfun person to watch TV with. I really loved everything I was learning in my classes, deconstructing everything, social constructions of gender, race, identity, the economy, media, advertising. But the awareness that I had of how patriarchy, white supremacy, capitalism, oppression shaped the world around me was honestly starting to burn me out. It showed up in increased anger and frustration at others who just didn't get it, feeling tired about the idea of going to more protests, self-righteousness at family holidays. It felt constantly frustrating and not satisfying. I realized what I longed for was not just deconstructing, but reconstructing a sense of, yes, I know this idea is problematic, and that story is being told to make a profit, and this narrative upholds the domination of this other group of people. But what can we do instead? How am I supposed to live with all of this knowledge? What am I going to do? Around that same period of time, I had the opportunity to start working with a group of Unitarian Universalist friends who were working on starting an intentional living community grounded in the values and tradition of Unitarian Universalism. When my friend Matt, who I still live with today, first told me about this idea, and he and another mutual friend were throwing around about starting a cooperative house, my response was, this is literally the most banana nuts idea I have ever heard. I remember reflecting that I had always been taught that being an adult meant you get to make your own decisions without having to consult anyone else, let alone the practicalities of what it would take to get this project off the ground. But I was so compelled by the vision, the idea of housing being primarily a means of shelter, not profit, especially for those of us who would be primarily in a rental market. I was compelled by the idea of a cooperatively owned venture where people who otherwise would not have access to controlling their own living situation could democratically control their rent and decisions about the things that most affect their lives. I was compelled by a vision of shared decision-making, of living in a more interconnected community than what I grew up in, of home equity wealth going back into the community rather than to a landlord. And so I started working on this project along with a team of 6 or 7 others. And 18 months later, we bought a large 11-bedroom, 3-story house and started an experiment in cooperative, faith-based living. And we called it the Lucy Stone Cooperative. I lived there for 7.5 years, and those years were harder and more beautiful and more transformative than I ever could have imagined. And I still live with some of the people I met through that project. In the time I lived there, those 7.5 years, I shared a home with over 60 people, went to an estimated 400 2 to 3 hour house meetings, cooked an uncountable number of dinners for 15 people, had conflict and built consensus, shared the work of maintaining a home. We wrestled with questions about how to respond to harm. When someone stole money from the community, we struggled to decide how to balance our values. Keep rent affordable or upgrade the sustainability of our home. We shared spiritual practices and singing and meals and hosted UU youth groups when they came into town. There are so many things that I could say about my time living at Lucy Stone Cooperative, but what stands out to me now is how it filled a need for me of working to create the society that I wanted to live in, not just to live with discontent in a world that I knew to be broken. It was generating, announcing, dreaming the world that my heart knew was possible. Which is not to say it wasn't also heartbreaking and devastatingly hard at times. It was not utopia, not even close. But it was a kind of experiment in trying to bring into being that world that our hearts know is possible. Unitarian Universalist historian and scholar Dan Concannon wrote in his book, Prophetic Encounters, "When human beings encounter one another deeply in the midst of their struggles for freedom and equality and community, prophetic power is unleashed. This is power to denounce, to condemn those who would grind the faces of the poor into the dust, in the words of Isaiah. It is also the power to announce, to proclaim God's kingdom that will be realized here on earth, the beloved community." Dan Concannon wrote this book on religion and the American radical tradition, which he describes by saying, "Some would call it the path of the prophets. Others speak of the American radical tradition, or simply the left. It is the tradition of abolitionists who called on their neighbors to immediately renounce the sin of slavery, of feminists who recognize patriarchy as itself a form of slavery, of socialists who labored to build a cooperative commonwealth, and of pacifists who saw war as the ultimate affront to humanity. There is such a strong tradition in our Unitarian Universalist faith of working for a better world, a world of more justice and equity where all are able to thrive. And in order to do that, one of the sacred tools that we must draw on is the tool of imagination. The tool not just of denouncing the world as it is, but of announcing, here's what I imagine a better world to look like. Reverend Heather continues, this week, I have wanted to do a lot of denouncing. From the heartbreak of hearing about non-binary teen Nex Benedict's death, to the continued horrors of airstrikes and invasion in Rafah, to the Alabama Supreme Court ruling that frozen embryos can be considered children under the law. I just want to denounce all of it. But friends, I also believe that faith is the work of living with a foot in two worlds, the world as it is and the world that our hearts know is possible. And spiritual maturity is being able to hold both at once, the world that we live in and the world that is not yet. Theologian Walter Brueggemann says, imagination is a danger. Thus, every totalitarian regime is frightened of the artist. It is the vocation of the prophet to keep alive the ministry of imagination, to keep on conjuring and proposing alternative futures to the single one the king wants to urge as the only thinkable one. We too often cede imagination to the realm of children. But to keep on conjuring up and proposing alternative futures for our own lives and for the world is not a childish act. It is a prophetic one. It says, this world we've been handed, this broken, hurting world, it doesn't have to be like this. I can imagine better for us. Together, we can build it. And friends, I believe this is the work of religion and of faith. Faith that the way things are is not the way things must be. Faith that another world is possible. And I believe that religious communities are one of the places that we come together to build that world, to bring into being the world our hearts know is possible. And we do this in all sorts of ways, from mutual aid, like our caring ministry team, showing up with meals and rides and comfort and companionship, to showing up for struggles for racial and economic justice, to working to examine and uproot the ways that white supremacy culture shows up in our institutions, to learning more about what it means to be transgender, non-binary, or gender conforming, and how to continue to widen our circle of welcome. Church can be a place where we practice living in that world, if only just for brief moments of solidarity, justice-making, acceptance, and making love manifest in the world. And there are times when we can catch glimpses of that world. I've most often experienced this in religious community, summer camps and retreats, congregations showing up for one another, interfaith dinners, and those moments, those glimpses of that better world can sustain us on the long road as we work toward it. And I wonder, where have you caught a glimpse of that world your heart knows is possible? The root of the word religion is from the Latin religare, which means rebinding. Sometimes I think that religion can help us to build the bridge, to bind together the world as it is to the world as it could be. Because, friends, I can imagine a world where transgender and non-binary teens can thrive. I can imagine a world in which no hostages are ever taken, and flattening a city of 1.4 million refugees is unthinkable. I can imagine a world in which bodily autonomy is a sacred right and reproductive justice is just a given. It's not something that we have to fight to protect. I can imagine a world where all people are inherently valuable, where Black lives matter, where trans lives matter, where we see ourselves as deeply interconnected with one another and with the earth. I've worked for many years with children at a UU summer camp, and here's the amazing thing about listening to the kids on the matter. They have had less time under oppression and having not reached the point where society tells them to stop imagining and to think about what is practical, that they can actually come up with some really creative and beautiful ideas. And what a gift, right? We can learn so much from the impulse to cast a vision without having a full roadmap of how to get there. Because that, too, is our work as people of faith. We are called to primarily be vision casters, not policy makers, although we need those too. We are called to not let the murky roadmap tamp down our conviction that no, this world as it is not just. And yes, another world is possible. In order to start imagining that world that our hearts know is possible, we need all of us, the dreamers, the architects, the thinkers, the hold on, go slowers, the policymakers, the preachers, the workers and teachers and artists and parents and healers, the elders, the young ones. We need to share that world that is in our own hearts. We need to practice annunciation, not only denunciation, in small ways and big ways. And this is why we come together in church, because religious communities hold out faith that another world is possible, that another way of living is possible. We seek to make manifest through our communities that world, the beloved community, and to practice here, creating the world our hearts know is possible. So friends, let us dream, vision, announce the world that our hearts know is possible, even though we know that it is the work of generations and we are unlikely to see that world in our lifetimes. Even when the path to that world may be unclear, with faith and hope and love, let us together build, or at least get a little bit closer to the world that our hearts know is possible. May it be so. Amen. The Reverend Heather Concannon.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. I invite you to rise in body or spirit to sing our closing hymn, number 131, Love Will Guide Us. Please remain standing afterward for the benediction and extinguishing of the chalice. everyone, especially song leaders. As Chris Kynes comes forward to extinguish our flames, please consider these words of Reverend Michelle Collins. Though the flame is extinguished, the embers of imagination remain. Carry them forward, dream boldly, act with love, and kindle new fires in the world. Amen, and blessed be.